One of the most common questions new wholesalers ask is, what happens if I don't or can't find a buyer? Now, if you've wondered that, this video is for you. I'm gonna break down exactly what your obligations and your risks are with entering into a contract, as well as how to legally back out of a wholesale deal without any negative consequences, so you have zero risk. All of that and more coming up.
For a limited time, you can get a free copy of Jerry Norton's Quick Start Kit with everything you need to flip your first house in 30 days or less. Download it now at myquickstartkit.com.
If you're new here to the channel, I'm Jerry Norton with FlippingMastery.com, and this channel is all about ways to help you make money wholesaling and flipping real estate so you can live your dream life. Be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss new videos. With like 400 videos as of this recording on this channel, all about wholesaling and fixing and flipping, this is a very interesting topic for me, and not one that I would have thought of making a video about on my own, but I pay close attention to your comments and questions, and this is one that I've seen frequently, and that is, what if I can't find a buyer for my wholesale deal? Now, I'm going to answer that question as well as how to legally back out of a contract, but first, let me put this in the proper context. The essence of wholesaling is getting a contract with a seller and then assigning or flipping that contract to another buyer for a fee. That means you, the wholesaler, are going to enter into a legally binding purchase and sale agreement, aka contract, with a seller, and in the contract, you are the buyer. Your intention is to wholesale or assign your contract, but until then, you are the buyer on the contract with the seller. As the buyer on the contract, you have what's called equitable interest in the property. That contract and the right to buy the property is an asset. In the contract, you and the seller have certain obligations. You as the buyer are promising to perform specific things, namely to buy the property, and the seller is promising specific things as well, namely to sell you the property. But also in the contract, there are certain conditions, or what we call contingencies, that if either party fails to perform or provide, the other party is no longer obligated to the contract. For example, the contract states that you as the buyer will buy the property contingent upon clear title, free of liens or encumbrances. So if the seller cannot provide free and clear title, you as the buyer are no longer obligated to buy. Now, by the way, I did a video explaining how to wholesale properties with mortgages, back taxes, and other liens. If interested in learning more about that, I'll put a link in the description box below and you can watch it later. Another common contingency for buyers who are getting a loan is a financing contingency, which states that the buyer will purchase the property contingent upon obtaining financing. So if the buyer doesn't, he or she is no longer obligated to buy the property. By the way, as wholesalers and flippers, we offer what's called all cash, which means we do not have a financing contingency, and therefore if we do not produce the funds necessary to buy the property, we are still obligated to the terms of the contract. We'll discuss the repercussions in a minute, so keep watching. Now, another very common contingency in the contract for buyers is an inspection contingency. This states that the buyer will buy the property contingent upon the property passing an inspection. As part of the inspection contingency, the buyer has a specific number of days or a deadline date to perform the inspection, and if for whatever reason the due diligence performed by the buyer during the inspection period is unsatisfactory, the buyer is technically no longer obligated to buy. The inspection contingency could be for 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, or whatever the buyer and seller agree on. I once did a land deal with a 6-month inspection contingency. Once the agreed upon days or date is up, the contingency is removed and the buyer is once again obligated to buy. Now, the inspection contingency is the best way out of a contract, and I'm going to share with you how to strategically use it to protect yourself as a wholesaler. But first, let's talk about the repercussions for non-performance on a contract. This is what new wholesalers worry about. What happens if you don't perform on the contract? Well, let's set aside real estate for a minute. If you think about normal contract law, if one party defaults, the other party could sue for non-performance, and a court or a judge could award a judgment or liquidated damages or whatever. Well, in residential real estate, if the buyer defaults, the seller could sue for non-performance, but if he did, he would spend thousands of dollars in legal fees. He would not be able to sell the property to someone else while it's in litigation, and even if he won the case, A judge or court cannot make somebody buy a property. Instead, what happens is a seller could require from the buyer a good faith deposit, or what's commonly called an earnest money deposit, or EMD. Now, this is money the buyer puts down upfront at the time of executing the contract to show his commitment to the seller. The EMD could be as little as $1, or it could be, $10,000, or any amount agreed upon in the contract between the buyer and seller. And if the buyer performs according to the contract, the EMD is applied towards the purchase. If he doesn't perform according to the contract, he forfeits his EMD and the seller keeps it, and then he puts the property back up for sale to find a new buyer. Now, no one wants to default on a contract. It's not cool to back out of a deal. Yes, the seller or agent, if it's on market, is going to be mad at you, but the worst thing that will happen is you lose your earnest money deposit. That's it. Nobody's gonna sue you. Nobody's gonna force you to buy it. Nobody's gonna put you in prison. Other than upsetting someone and losing your earnest money deposit, nothing else is gonna happen. Are we clear on that? Okay, now in wholesaling, let me show you how to not even lose your EMD, whether it's $10 or $1,000 or whatever it is. Now remember our inspection contingency. That's your way out of a contract. That means if for whatever reason you decide not to move forward with the purchase during the inspection contingency window, you can back out of the contract and the seller has to release your earnest money deposit. Okay, so here's how to protect your earnest money using an inspection contingency. Put in your contracts a 10-day inspection contingency, and then during those 10 days, work hard to find and secure your buyer. And I found that if I talk to a dozen or more local active cash buyers and I don't find one that wants my deal, I probably don't have a deal. So if during the 10 days you can't find a buyer, exercise your inspection contingency and terminate the contract, and the seller would have to release your earnest money deposit. Okay, now pro tip here, what happens if you find a buyer but their price is lower than your desired wholesale price? Well, rather than exercising your contingency and terminating the contract, instead renegotiate with the seller at a lower price. For example, let's say that you have a contract with a seller for $150,000 and your desired wholesale fee is $10,000, so you're offering the deal for $160,000 to cash buyers, and after talking to a dozen or so local active buyers during your 10-day inspection window, your best offer from buyers is $150,000. Well, that's not gonna work because you have the contract for $150,000. So rather than exercising your inspection contingency and terminating the contract, instead go back to the seller and renegotiate down to $140,000. If the seller agrees, you have a buyer ready to go for $150,000. Say the following to the seller: during my inspection, I discovered that the repairs were more than I originally anticipated, and therefore I would still like to purchase this property, but will need a $10,000 price reduction from $150,000 to $140,000. Now, if the seller agrees, you just locked in your $10,000 wholesale fee. If he does not agree, exercise your inspection contingency, terminate the contract, and get back your earnest money deposit. Listen, following this strategy, you really have zero risk wholesaling. Now, the key is making sure to add that into your contract with the seller, and if you'd like my contract that I use, I'll give it to you for free, along with several other tools to help you get your first deal in the next 30 days. Just go to myquickstartkit.com. And hey, if you learned something new in this video, show some love, hit that like button right now, and leave a comment. Let me know your biggest takeaway from this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm dedicated to helping you make more money flipping and wholesaling houses so that you can live your dream life. And be sure to watch this next video where I'm going to show you how to not pay an earnest money deposit. It's a really cool hack technique, so be sure to watch that now, and I'll see you on the next video.